Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft, and joining me on this edition of Illinois Rising is Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute. He is Ted Dabrowski. Welcome to another edition of Illinois Rising. Ted, thanks for joining us. Why don't we do a little bit of Siskel and Ebert at the outset, a little movie review of a documentary we've both seen, Madigan, Power, Politics, Privilege. This is produced by a respected documentarian that was contracted by the Illinois Policy Institute to produce this one-hour documentary. And the thing I like about it is somebody who's been in Illinois politics for the past, 100 years, it seems. Me, not Madigan, although Madigan too, is for the kind of passively engaged Illinois voter family. I know Madigan, I know kind of about Illinois politics, but I don't know the specifics, I don't know the history. It fills in a lot of the blanks, and I think it engages you in the way that a good a biopic on the History Channel would engage you to understand something that you've got a visceral reaction towards, but you don't really, and you know something isn't right in this case, but you don't quite know how it all came to be, kind of answering the question that a lot of people are asking about the presidential race this cycle. How did we get here? This Madigan documentary, for me, I think, and for a lot of people, will answer the question how we got here, how Madigan got here, and how he's been able to stay.
Yeah, for a lot of people, he's a mystery. And there's a reason why he stays out of the press, or he used to stay out of the press all the way. But for most people, they don't know who he is. And for those of us who do know who he is, a lot of the pieces, the parts of the puzzle, how he got to so much power, we don't know. And so I think this thing does do a really good job of going back and saying, here's how he got his power. Here's how he consolidated. Here's the lessons he learned as he went along. And, why he's become so powerful. And
it really is a wild case study. I mean, we're talking about the longest-serving House Speaker in Illinois history, State House Speaker in Illinois history. I always say he's the longest-serving in U.S. history. I guess there's one guy who's got 18 months on him. So he is soon to become, if he's successful in holding the majority on November 8th, soon to become the longest-serving State House Speaker in the history of our country. That demands some investigation. That is an interesting political story. And somebody who has faced that political story in its human form in real time is our next guest. He's Jason Gonzales. He ran for state representative in the Democrat primary against Mike Madigan this past March. Jason, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, and you were also one of those who were interviewed, Democrats and Republicans interviewed in this Madigan documentary about Madigan and about your experience. So for those around the state who are not as familiar with that primary challenge you lodged against Madigan, give us a thumbnail sketch of your experience running against this House Speaker Mike Madigan we're discussing.
Well, I knew he'd be a tough opponent, and he's a wily figure. So, he's the type of guy who'll do anything to get elected. He'll go to any lengths. But I never expected that he would go to illegal lengths to actually defeat me. Putting two candidates in on the ballot in front of my eyes in Springfield. Using dirty, tactics that were clearly defamation, not only in the mailers but in also television ads, and just blatantly lying to people at the doors, about who I was, about my character, and it was just one thing after another.
Jason, did you expect something different, or was this just in line with what you expected? Because he's been in power for a long time. It shouldn't be surprising that he's going to use any tactic he can. And I think that's what the film showed. Is he's got a lot of tactics and a lot of power to keep people out. So. What was your expectation, and how did that meet your expectation?
Well, I knew it was going to be tough. I knew that, he was going to play hardball, and, that he was going to, play dirty because Mike Madigan and his crew don't play clean. But I didn't expect him to actually resort to legal tactics. And I think that that's where, the line has to be drawn here is, that there's a certain level of I think decency. I think there's a certain level, in a campaign where, there's just places you don't go. So I didn't expect.
Give us an example of a place he went that you didn't expect him to go, or something that was, in your estimation, illegal.
Well, again, it crossed the line of defamation, and I think that, what he did with the television commercials, putting a jail cell on there with codes running across, making it look like I was a guy who was just walking out of Joliet Penitentiary. I mean, this stuff clearly, in my eyes and many other people's eyes, was just uncalled for.
And you've filed a defamation suit against Michael Madigan, right?
That's right. Yeah, in federal court. So hopefully we'll get some justice there, and we'll get some justice for some of the other candidates that are going to, be running in the future and that have run in the past.
And for those of not familiar with you mentioned it at the outset, but I want to get a little bit more specific about it. Those not familiar with this tactic, you talked about him putting two candidates on the ballot before your eyes in Springfield as you were filing. And we've seen this before in Madigan's district, as well as other districts, where essentially stooge candidates are put up to dilute the vote, to confuse the voter, especially with a newcomer like you. And for those that don't like Madigan, this spreads the anti-Madigan vote across several candidates, so it can't just consolidate around one candidate. That's essentially what he did here. He put two candidates on the ballot with Hispanic surnames who didn't run campaigns, but helped to dilute your vote.
That's correct. And, they've been doing this kind of stuff for years, and no one's challenged them. So, I think that it's time that, someone such as myself stands up to this stuff and, gets a court ruling and says, look, aren't there some guidelines here? Aren't there some, some standards that have to be met for candidates when they're running? I mean, this was blatant. I mean, we're alleging civil rights violations, obviously, of the Voter Rights Act, which, I think we've got a pretty good case, and so does my attorney. But, we'll see. We'll see how the court rules. Certainly, something has to be done about this. It's notorious. It happens around the country, but more so in Chicago and Cook County.
So you, of course, you have your defamation suit, and you're trying to get him to pay a price for that. But what's the other way that Illinois? We've all seen Madigan be in power for more than 30 years, and nobody seemed to be able to get him out. So what are the kind of things that you think need to be done? We talk a lot about term limits. We talk about remapping. What has to happen to get a guy like Madigan out of power?
Well, let's remember that, Mike Madigan owns the judges in Cook County. He has just too much power. He has more power than any man in a democracy should have. I think what we need to do is we need to start aiming in the right direction. I mean, I think the Illinois Policy Institute did a great job with the documentary. I think we need to raise awareness more for who Mike Madigan is, but we also have to get people over here into this area to start, kind of raising hell about what's going on in Illinois. I mean, all of this stuff that's taking place downstate and outside of the district in Springfield, the voters in my district could care less. There's a lot of voters here who could care less if the state of Illinois is burning to the ground as long as Mike Madigan cuts their trees. So we need to start building a movement right here in this area around Midway Airport to raise awareness about why Mike Madigan is bad for the community and why he's bad for the state of Illinois. And we need to start taking action right here in his backyard, because otherwise nothing is going to change.
Now, I mean, the way you're describing the landscape and the climate in Madigan's district would lead one perhaps to be a bit fatalistic about the possibilities. But you obviously don't think Madigan is indomitable, because I've heard you say you're planning on running again against him in 2018. If that's the case, how is next time going to be different than this time?
Well, I haven't made any hard and fast decisions about whether I'm going to run in 2018 against him or not. I mean, obviously I'm thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at a lot of different things, okay? It could be a different race that I run for. I just haven't decided yet. There's a lot of things that can change. You've got more time. You've got the opportunity to build a political base. There's an opportunity to knock on more doors, to raise awareness, to understand, get people educated about the issues, get people registered to vote. There's a lot of room here, but it takes time, it takes money, it takes dedicated people and resources to be able to win.
Well, and I guess the hopeful note is that despite your experience that has led you to litigation in various forms, you're still desirous of staying involved and participating in some way. So that's a note of optimism.
Well, I think so. I think we shouldn't give up, right? I mean, if we give up, we let the bad guy win, and Illinois continues to go into the ground. We continue to not have substantial conversations about policy. We continue to be ruled by a machine and by one man, and many of us still believe that there's hope for Illinois, and to give up hope and despair is not the right thing to do. But I think, in my calculus, Dan, we've got to start aiming in the right direction, and we got to start aiming closer to where we can actually make a difference.
All right. He is Jason Gonzales, primary candidate against House Speaker Mike Madigan, and still staying involved both in the courts and in the political arena. Jason, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.